The war between Ukraine and Russia, which broke out in early 2022, was born out of Putin's unprovoked aggression and his egos. In the last quarter of 2021, the North Atlantic Alliance and the Scandinavian countries experienced great tension, and the Russian Federation, despite everything, started an attempt to invade Ukraine on the dawn of February 24. Putin's high ego and confidence in the Russian military's iron fist drove him into this brutal undertaking. Putin's high ego and confidence in the Russian military's iron fist drove him into this brutal undertaking. However, after the attempted invasion of Ukraine, Putin realized that he was in a huge blunder as a result of the successive blows he received from the West and even from his most trusted allies. As powerful Western sanctions plunged the Russian Federation into great economic turmoil, Putin's most trusted diplomats and oligarchs left him one after another. It was predicted that the war between Ukraine and Russia would end in 3 days and that the Kiev administration would fall. At least Putin dreamed of it. However, when he came to the 7th month of the war, the Russian president does not get rid of trouble. Wagner Group mercenaries and elite Russian troops sent by Vladimir Putin to the Ukraine campaign were destroyed one after another by the Ukrainian armed forces. While Putin lost nearly 1,000 Russian elite forces in Ukraine, he lost more than 50,000 Russian soldiers and over 6,000 armored vehicles and tanks in total. These massive losses could herald a much bigger downturn for Putin. The Russian people, who broke their silence in the face of these losses and the heavy sanctions of the West, are now shaking the Putin regime and Putin's throne. While Putin received heavy blows one after another for the reasons we mentioned, he's shaken by the news of the resignation of his biggest supporter and most trusted ally in the unjust Ukraine cause, the Chechen leader. Using Chechen fighters as a powerful trump card since the beginning of the Ukraine war, Putin has been disappointed many times over Chechnya. Among the Chechen fighters that Putin sent to Ukraine, the two most powerful elite Chechen battalions fought against Putin by joining the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces. Some Chechen fighters, on the other hand, went towards establishing an anti-Putin force in Chechnya. In other words, Putin began to be threatened by the Chechens in both Ukraine and Chechnya. Nevertheless, Putin felt safe, albeit partially, as the Putin-backed Ramzan Kadyrov was at the head of the Chechnya administration. But recent developments show us that Putin may have nightmares in Chechnya after Ukraine. Putin is stunned as the Kremlin loses another key ally in the Ukraine war. Putin was left red-handed as Karev suggested that he was about to retire as an important military ally of Putin. At the moment, Putin is in danger of fighting Chechnya on an additional front, because if Kadyrov retires from the Chechnya administration, the fire of revenge will flare up in the hearts of Chechens who do not forget the persecution they have suffered from Russia and Putin. Kadyrov was one of the biggest partners in Putin's invasion operation in Ukraine and was declared a war criminal by Ukraine. Kadyrov's resignation could be Putin's biggest loss to date. Chechnya President Ramzan Kadyrov claims that he has left combat operations in Ukraine for an indefinite and long hiatus. The president of Chechnya is the last and most important of a series of high-profile figures who deserted Vladimir Putin in his attempt to invade the whole of Ukraine. And Delta, another blow to the president of Russia. In his public statements, Kadyrov stated that he realized that he was the longest-living person among the presidents of the republics in the Russian Federation. Continuing his statements, the first one said that he has ruled the Republic of Chechnya for 15 years. Caucasians, Chechens say no matter how respected and long-awaited a guest is, if he leaves on time, then it's even better. So I guess it's time for me too, before they got kicked out of here. I was already old. I used to be the youngest and least experienced, and that is how I stay. I was inexperienced. My youth is gone, said Kadyrov. After these statements by Kadyrov, comments were made that he was seriously considering resignation. It could also be a move to reassure confidence. However, the Chechen leader has been severely worn out recently due to his support for Putin. In recent days, there has been growing dissatisfaction with Karev in Chechnya about sending men to war in Ukraine, in Chechnya. In Chechnya, there is growing dissatisfaction with the president of the republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, who sent local men to the war against Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence reported that 4 battalions were formed in Chechnya to be sent to war against Ukraine. A significant number of the so-called volunteers appeared to be local men who were abducted in the countryside. They are forced to sign contracts under the threat of torture and prosecution in fabricated cases. The practice of kidnapping people for volunteer battalions caused a wave of discontent with Ramzan Kadyrov in Chechnya. Locals believe that Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a war between two Christian peoples, and Muslims have nothing to do there. This belief among the Chechen people also causes them to choose their side. The fight in the region. Most Chechnya citizens and fighters know that the Ukrainian people are right, fighting for a noble cause that took place in Ukraine, and they now have to share the same fate as the Chechens 20 years ago. The number of Chechens who think that they and the Ukrainian people are experiencing the same things is very high. Chechens who think that Russia has established dominance in their own land by making a fascist attempt do not want the same to happen to Ukraine, as you may recall. Chechen warriors fought twice with the Russian army. In both these wars they inflicted serious casualties on the Russian army, but they lost. But it's also thought that some freedom-loving fighter is waiting for Russia to fall from power and is preparing for a freedom war again. Similar situations occurred with Chechen fighters sent to Ukraine. Putin was humiliated as rebel Chechen soldiers joined the war against Russia. Chechen forces joined the brave Ukrainian defenders to repel the Russians. Some Chechens are fighting for Russia. The Sokar Dudi Battalion and Sheikh Mansour Battalion fought alongside the Ukrainian defenders, while the Kadyrov Vast forces fought alongside the troops of Moscow. It is reported that there are legendary warriors in these two battalions, and they give serious tips to the Ukrainian armed forces on how to fight against the Russians. These two elite Chechen battalions consist of unique fighters with 20 years of combat experience, perhaps even more experienced at the Spetsnaz level at the time. It is known that Chechen fighters who crossed the ranks of Ukraine shared the coordinates of Russia's critical points with the Ukrainian armed forces. This information was shared by the warriors in the battalions themselves. Some have long been involved in conflicts in the disputed eastern regions of Ukraine. That Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov sent more men to Ukraine at the start of the invasion. An unarmed Chechen soldier said he was fighting in Ukraine because he believed Russia's evil should be destroyed. The soldiers said that in Tsarist Russia, General, Yermolov stole everything from us, but we got rid of it. Stalin is dead. Putin will die. We will outlive these people in Chechnya. Belief began to grow that Putin was provoking them. Chechnya's leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, and his docile theologians are trying to convince the Chechens that the war in Ukraine is a holy jihad and the duty of every Muslim. However, the understanding of jihad in Islam is made only when defending their land or when the religion, beliefs, and freedom of the people are threatened. There is no such situation in the imposition of Russia. On the contrary, it is the opposite. Vladimir Putin and Kadyrov are just trying to deceive people with religion, manipulation, and propaganda. On the other hand, the noble cause of Ukraine can be seen as jihad, which explains the existence of tens of thousands of Muslims fighting on Ukraine's side against Russia. In Chechnya, they apparently do not believe in the rightness of war with Ukraine. Most of those sent to the region for Kadyrov are fighters who went to Ukraine for different reasons, even inexperienced soldiers. Only those who are seduced by the hope of making money and deceived by religious manipulation go to Ukraine. At the same time, volunteers are not required to have any combat experience or even military experience. They are fully aware that they have been sent to the area to form a dry crowd. Putin is sending Chechens to Ukraine as artillery bait, and the Chechens are aware of this. Kadyrov's resignation may have laid a new mine under Putin. This mine seems very likely to explode. If Kadyrov resigns, Putin will try to persuade his ally. But how successful it can be, we'll see. We are with you with our special report as the first broadcast of our channel. If you like our work, do not forget to comment, turn on notifications and subscribe. We wish peace and tranquility to Ukraine, Chechnya, and all oppressed peoples for a peaceful world.